good to have you with us in this edition of the Urban Debate. Viewers, I'm appalled at the way we seem to be reacting to the very, very concerning and tragic news that has come of 4 different big boats, barges, vessels that have been stranded in the rough Arabian Sea in the middle of a cyclone. I am amazed that in today's day and age, with all the equipment and tools that we have at our disposal for advance warnings, for communications, we were still not able to, in time, get these people out of there before the cyclone hit. Until now, we don't even have clear information of what's going on as far as the sunken ship is concerned. And I'm appalled as to how it doesn't even matter to a large percentage of people today. How is this not the biggest talking point in our country tonight? A cyclone that has left behind a trail of devastation along the western coast, but for which we had advance information. A cyclone for which we did do preparations. We evacuated people. On ground, we moved COVID patients from centers even in Mumbai and Gujarat to safer locations. And we didn't think about the people who work on these offshore rigs, who work on these vessels as part of the offshore drilling. We completely seem to have forgotten about them until disaster struck. 4 different vessels have sent SOS since last afternoon. Over 700 people were stranded across these 4 different vessels, stranded in a cyclone and the roughest sea condition possible. One of the vessels' main anchor broke away and it just drifted apart in the stormy seas. One vessel has sunk now. A part of that crew was rescued, we know. What happened to the rest, we are waiting for a status update. That's one vessel. Of the 707 people originally on board, 317 have been rescued so far. 297 are still on board 2 of these vessels, 2 of these mini ships. And they are still on board, have to be rescued. And for 93, we don't know what the status is. Now let me tell you what happened and how it transpired. The Met Department's first warning, major warning about Cyclone Tauktae came on May 11th at 3 p.m. On May 13th, a more detailed warning and an update with the way the cyclone was developing and moving and where it could move towards came on May 13 at 1 p.m. Another one a day later on May 14 at 1:30 p.m. an updated one. And then as it began to gather pace, gather intensity, IMD continued to give us more details. On May 13, we know that a low pressure area was formed. By May 14, a depression had been formed as far as the cyclonic storm is concerned. By May 14 night, in fact, it had full-fledged become a cyclonic storm. By May 15 afternoon, it had become a severe cyclonic storm. By May 16th, a very severe cyclonic storm. And as of yesterday, it was a extremely severe cyclonic storm. So we knew it at every single point. The IMD's landing predictions, though, obviously kept evolving as the cyclone moved. On May 13, they said it will make a landfall near Gujarat on May 18th by evening. And gradually, as we moved closer to the date, that prediction kept changing. It then became May 18 morning, May 18 afternoon, and finally we were told that, well, 17th night it is. The cyclone did make a landfall last night. So I have a question. With all of this information available, how is it that over 700 people in an organized working structure, not even fishermen who get out there on their own, in an organized working structure for offshore drilling, rigging, maintenance, whatever work. How were they left behind? Why were they not brought back to safer locations? What is the system really that's followed in such cases? Were warnings delayed or were the warnings ignored? Where does the accountability lie for what's just happened? Let me say good evening to the panelists who are joining us on this conversation. Ved Prakash Mahavar, former director onshore and head for crisis management at ONGC. Sanjay Datta, senior journalist at Times of India, who tracks the energy market developments and their impacts very, very closely. Dr. K.J. Ramesh, former DIG for IMD and member for the Technical Commission for Air Quality Management now in New Delhi. Mahesh Palawat, Vice President for SkyMet, and Commodore R.S. Vasan, former Regional Commander for Coast Guard Eastern Region of the Indian Navy. But before I go across to our guests, I want to play out two comments that we got, two bites that we got of those people who were rescued, who went through horror and are now asking this question, why weren't we taken out of there earlier? Listen in.
12-1 बजे की बात है। एंकर पहला एंकर टूट गया, फिर सभी एंकर टूटते चले गए। बार्ज अपनी हवा के बट चलता रहा, हवा के बैल चलता रहा, और फिर एक यनमैन था उसमें ठुक गया, उधर जाके होल हो गया उसमें। लेकिन मैं तो सच तो यही बोलूँगा, क्योंकि गवर्नमेंट ने बोल दिया था इधर साइक्लोन आने वाला है, कोई भी बार्ज इधर नहीं रहना चाहिए। उन्होंने ज़बरदस्ती ही बार्ज को रखा, क्योंकि उनको देखना चाहिए था ना कि 250-300 आदमी इधर काम करने वाले हैं, वो सभी मरेंगे। तो सभी बार्ज निकाल के ले गए, तो उनको भी बार्ज निकालना चाहिए था ना।
तो जब मुझे अगर ये बात बताइए कि जब यह बार्ज डूबने लगा, उस वक्त आप कौन सी जगह पर थे और वहाँ का माहौल क्या था? निश्चित तौर पे बहुत अफरा तफरी मची होगी लोगों में।
बहुत वहाँ का माहौल बहुत ही ख़राब हो गया था, बहुत अफरा थफरी मची थी उधर। अफरा थफरी तो पहला जब बिल्डिंग डूबा, अफरा थफरी तो तभी कूदना शुरू हो गया था आदमी। तो कोई बचा है, कोई मरा है, कोई जहाज़ के अंदर ही घुस गया, किसी का कोई मालूम नहीं है।
कि जब आप कूदे थे उस वक्त क्या आपके साथ बाकी साथी भी कूदे थे? आपने किन लोगों को किस हालात में देखा?
मैं बताता हूँ, हम हरियाणा के 8-10 आदमी हैं। हरियाणा के सारे एक बार इकट्ठे उठे थे, कूदे थे। हमने झुंड बना लिया था। मेरे को पानी अंदर चला गया, मैं अलग हो गया उनसे। वो आगे साइक्लोन की वजह से आगे निकल गए, मैं अकेला ही रह गया था। तो मैं अकेला ही सामना करता रहा, मेरे साथ कोई नहीं रहा। फिर लास्ट में
कितने लोग बचे? कुछ लोगों को आपने देखा वहाँ पर, बाकी लोग भी जिंदा थे, अभी भी लड़ गए वहाँ पर, या कुछ लोगों ने अपना दम भी तोड़ दिया? कुछ दुखद।
हाँ, बहुत आदमियों ने मेरे साथ थे शुरू में, उन्होंने दम तोड़ दिया था।
आपने यानी कि आप ये कह रहे हैं कि आपने कुछ लाशें भी वहाँ बहते हुए तैरते हुए
देखा है? मैंने 2 लाशें तैरते हुए देखा है, और इससे आगे तो मैंने देखा नहीं।
और फिलहाल ये जो मंजर है, आप इसे कभी नहीं भुला पाएंगे?
नहीं, ऐसे को मैं कभी भी भुला नहीं पाऊंगा, क्योंकि आंखों से मैंने अपनी आंखों से मृत्यु को देखा है।
This man was lucky that help reached on time, that when the SOS message was sent, immediately ships were activated by Coast Guard and the Navy, and despite the rough seas, people attempted to go in and save people. Choppers were put into place. And despite the rough weather conditions, these choppers went in to rescue people to whatever extent they could. And I'm glad that so many people have been rescued. But why did we reach this situation in the first place? Let's try and understand that. And I actually want to start off with Mahesh Palawat on this. Mahesh, let's first help us understand the way the warnings are issued. And was there a sudden change in the trajectory, in the intensity of this cyclone that we actually did not know too much in advance?
The Meteorological Department, Indian Meteorological Department, as well as SkyMet and many other agencies were on sync about the development of cyclone and the trajectory of the cyclone. And we have issued a warning well before the onset of the onslaught, and the trajectory was predicted well in advance by IMD as well as by SkyMet. Earlier, we were anticipating that it will head towards Dwarka, Devbhoomi Dwarka, and therefore crossing Gulf of Kutch towards Nadia. But as it develops, and the anticipation of route change was there. We changed the route towards Amreli, or we can say New Amreli, all these areas, and warning was issued well before time. On, as you have as you have said that on 11th of May, the formation of cyclone was anticipated, as it was a low pressure area. Thereafter, it evolved very rapidly from a severe cyclone to a very severe cyclone, and anticipation was about the as a very severe cyclone. It will head towards South Gujarat coast, but it intensified rapidly into extremely severe cyclone. And warning was issued as the wind speed will be around 170 to 180 kilometer per hour, and in the over northeast Arabian Sea, where all these risks of ONGC and many other companies are present, and where this unfortunate accident has taken place. So it is responsibility of the company, of the people concerned, to take the warning seriously, because there was no lapse on the account of IMED or SkyMet or any other agency. International agencies like JTWC, CIMSS, all were predicting same track, almost same track. They were all in sync about the intensity and the landfall of that cyclone. Yeah.
No, so why I'm asking you this question is also because, basis what you described, did it look like where these vessels were originally anchored and where, these barges were originally working, that they could have actually weathered this intensity of storm? I mean, did it seem that it wouldn't be so intense there and they could continue having people in that zone?
No, it is unlikely that they can withstand such a fury of a storm with the intensity of, say, wind speed will be around 170 to 180 kilometer per hour, and sea conditions will be rough to very rough. And we have issued a warning for all the operations should be suspended on 17th and 18th across Northeast Arabian Sea for ONGC. Other rigs which were applying there, like Adani, Reliance, and many rigs were there, many vessels were there, and warning was clear and loud that all the operations should be suspended on 17th and 18th. And it is up to the company or the agencies which were responsible that whether they understand the warning, the seriousness of warning or not.
Up to the agencies to whether they understand the seriousness of these warnings or not. Dr. KJ Ramesh, would you agree with what Mahesh Palawat is also saying here? And because I am trying to understand, when such warnings began 5 days ago, in the organized workspace, why would people still not be pulled out? It isn't even, even when there are fishermen who've already gone out into the waters, we send rescue coast guards to inform them and pull them back inside. So I am still trying to understand under what conditions would these guys have decided that no, it's okay, we don't need to bring these 700 people back.
I think it is there is a misunderstanding or miscalculation of the impact of the cyclone and the wave action and the rough weather associated with that, both over the sea and as well as overlying atmosphere. Although warnings were issued, these people have underestimated perhaps the impact of the cyclone. They thought perhaps that they can manage and withstand the disturbed weather, but that was not the case. That kind of chances should not have been taken. And the way people living in low-lying areas in coastal districts all along from Karnataka to Gujarat, all through Maharashtra coastal districts were vacated and moved to safer places, including the COVID patients, as you have just pointed out. No chances should have been taken in this particular case. Also, people living in barges, supporting the offshore drilling activities of ONGC.
Okay, So we've had now two weather experts telling us that there was absolutely no reason for why they should have been there when these warnings had been issued. Of course, the intensity changes, but everybody along the coast of Kerala, Karnataka, Goa, Maharashtra did take action basis these warnings and did take precautions basis these warnings. Let me just tell our viewers about these four boats or barges as they are called. Barge P305 is the one that's now sunk. It got into so much trouble that it couldn't weather it and it has now sunk. There were 273 people on board. It sent an SOS on Monday afternoon and immediately, response team was put into place. But because it was just floating away and away, it took time even for the rescue team to reach. Its anchor had broken away and the barge was just in the sea. Status of 93 people who were on board is not known to us. The second was the GL constructor, the Gaul constructor, with 137 people on board. All 137 of these have now been rescued. So this part is done. The third one was called Support Station 3. There were 196 people stranded and they are still stranded. The rescue operations should begin anytime soon, but that's how long it's taken for the rescue ships to actually move and get to this boat itself. And then there was the drill ship Sahara Bhushan with 101 people on board who still have to be rescued. This is the current situation. Let's talk about what are these ships and what do they do. Sanjay Datta, let me come to you. Will you be able to shed some light on these ships which ONGC says were largely given to their contractors and a consortium of contractors who were carrying out the work on behalf of ONGC. But what kind of work and who are these people? Is ONGC directly not responsible for them?
Good evening, Tanvi, and good evening to my fellow panelists. See, every profession or every industry comes with its own set of, what we call risk factors or professional hazards. And oil and gas is no different. And if not, it's more, it's riskier than many other professions. And every time an incident happens, the tendency is there to, immediately get into a blame game. But for the management of people involved, I have seen in my experience that the initial thing is about relief and rescue and rehabilitation, if the case may be. So in this case, there are issues, but to your question, the barges, the first question is whether these are ONGC's vessels. Now, every report has been saying ONGC, ONGC, ONGC. But the fact is that these are not ONGC vessels. These have been hired or contracted by ONGC, and these belong to a private, a very large oilfield services and engineering company. But that does not say that ONGC is not responsible. Of course, there is responsibility lies also with ONGC. Number two, the drill ship is owned by ONGC and it has a specific purpose. My information is that I've been told that it was deployed for drilling and exploration in the western offshore area. The other three barges, one P305, that Papa 305 is or was now a accommodation barge. So, these barges are not something like we see in the rivers or small-time boats. I mean, these are like floating colonies. You can imagine if there were 261 people on P305, it was like residential, and then you have the all added things, and then you have fuel and the generators, and they don't have an engine. So this is like that. And then the other two barges are also like, as they say, support barge. So it lends support. So every barge has a specific function and they don't have self-propulsion or they don't have a powertrain. And that's how they have to be towed, number one. Number two, there are at least 8 to 10, anchors. So they have to be dropped, but these are not like normal anchors that what we see in movies that, one machine or one button is pressed and the anchor goes down. You have to see that if it's a drilling barge, that barge needs to be stationary at one point because the drilling has to be pinpointed. So the moorings are actually carried by another ship or vessel, and then they are put. So I am told, and I have seen previously in elsewhere other projects also, that it's not so easy like you just press a button and say move. What happens is, I have been told, and I have verified it from various other organizations, that it could take, depending on the barge size, it could take up to maybe 7 to 8 days to first pull up the rigs and then move the barge, and you have to mobilize ships to sort of tow it. And then when these kind of situations arise, the master on each vessel, be it a ship or a barge, based on the input or the projections by either IMD or other agencies, they take a call that, okay, this is going to be the path, and I'm sure they would have some margin on that, and then they take a call that, okay, if we move this, let's say, to X nautical miles away from the path, we would be all right. In fact, shipping also follows the same kind of protocol. In this case, what I was told is that the path changed, number one, maybe not substantially, that needs to be verified. And second is the drop in pressure was sudden, and the projections were exceeded by many more times. So that sort of created this whole problem. Tanvi.
So you're saying, Mr. Datta, that essentially that it is not an easy process to move these barges from their locations and could take several days to actually bring them to safer shores. And secondly, perhaps there was an understanding that the intensity wouldn't be what it ended up being?
No, I didn't say that. Of course, I said that these are not easy, that you can just move them in a couple of days or 3 days. I mean, it takes a long time, because you also need to realize that except the accommodation barge, an accommodation barge always is near a project barge. So if a drilling operation is going on, you can't just switch it off. You have to give it time, you have to wind it down, and there are procedures, well laid out global procedures for all that. What I said is that master of each vessel takes the final call. And Mr. Mahavar is there, and he can elaborate on that. But we know that ONGC and other exploration companies have a very robust in-house SOP, standard operating procedure, which is like global practice. And each company, according to their area of operation, also improvise on it, improve on this. So what happened here is that the intensity suddenly, sharpened, and the path moved. So probably the master's calculations probably would have gone all right. And that is for later part of the thing, that when a committee is set up and people will look into all the data and all the information, probably we'll know for a fact. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. And I hope that happens at some later stage, because this must be answered. For now, we are, of course, even awaiting news on those who are still stranded and those whose status is unknown as to what happened. But we're just going to get Mr. Ved Prakash Mahavar in just a bit, and then I will take this point forward with him. But let me also bring in Commodore Vasan, who's joining us right now. Commodore Vasan, because, the pre-cyclone landfall, and then of course if there is trouble, then to go in and rescue, a lot of that role is played by the Navy and the Coast Guard in terms of warning people as well, asking them to come back to safer locations, and if an SOS is sent, then of course to send them out and help rescue them. In your expertise, Commodore Vasan, was this cyclone and the way it moved one of those where we should not have taken the risk of letting these 700 people be there on these barges?
I am heard. Good evening to all of you. It's very simple that obviously I think we erred in this entire process of making decision on not getting the people back. Even if it was difficult to take away all the 8 anchors that were mentioned earlier, at least the people who were there who were stranded should have been moved away. Of course, all this is hindsight, but the predictions were available. Everyone knew what was going to be the wind speed, And even if there is a small deviation, the fact that these small barges, support vessels, would not be able to storm the weather is something. Whether the storm is something that was known. So I think there are many serious questions, particularly when lives are involved. If we can move away 1.5 lakh people in low-lying areas and bring them ashore, why could we not do this for these 300, 400 people who are in each of these barges? So at that time, the safety of men was more important, and not so much as far as the vessels are concerned. So obviously, I feel that there are many questions to be answered by the people who took this decision to continue with the weather, despite knowing the ferocity that would hit them in the next 3-4 days. It's not that we didn't know the track, we didn't know that it was forming. So both IMD and SkyMet have clearly said that we knew how it was going to move, what was going to be the wind speed. So I think there's been a grave error of error of judgment on part of the people who are in charge in putting these people to risk and danger. Navy and Coast Guard will continue to do their job because that's their task. And Coast Guard, as the nodal agency, has moved out. Navy, because of the kind of vessels and capacity that they have joined hands, and they will do their job. But we should not have allowed this to happen. That's my firm view.
Yeah, I also wanted to, understand from you, from your experience as well, just how tough this job was. Over 300 people have been rescued, but to go into such rough seas at night time, when you don't know, whether what's falling on your face is rain or it's sea water spraying or what else it is, and to pull people out from those conditions. Just help us understand how difficult a task that is as well.
That's an extremely difficult task. Just because you are in the Navy or the Coast Guard, it does not mean that the ships and helicopters and aircraft are not subject to the vagaries of weather. Therefore, people are trained well for this task, and even there are limitations. If the wind speeds are that high, it's quite possible that even the helicopter will not be able to fly. So luckily in this case, the storm had moved away a little. Therefore, the conditions were a little more conducive for search and rescue operations. But the people who are going into this job are obviously going into the harm's way, because you don't know, because your own safety is also critical. The ships which are out there perhaps are slightly better placed because they are war machines which are built to certain specifications. But the helicopters, the aircraft, the smaller boats which are present to service are something which are very vulnerable. And now obviously they have to take their own precautions to see that there is not another tragedy. So it's why the Navy and the Coast Guard and all their assets are trained during peacetime to undertake these tasks. And every time they have excelled in performing these duties. But we should not have got into this situation in the first place. That's my concern. That despite knowing that here was a strong storm that was going to devastate the coast and the seas and the vessels, we still allowed this to happen. That's dangerous. I don't think we should have allowed this to happen. Not that the Navy and the Coast Guard will not run in to rescue people, it's our bounden duty. But why get into this place in the first place?
Okay, I completely agree with you. So where does the buck stop? That's the question. I think at some point the authorities will have to tell us what are the multiple layers who should have been responsible for ensuring safety of these people. I mean, they are construction workers or maintenance workers who are working on these offshore projects who are currently away in the seas from all parts of our country. And for us to have this kind of an attitude is extremely disturbing for me. Something somewhere has gone wrong, and we must find the answer to that question. Mr. Ved Prakash Mahawar, good evening to you. Thank you for speaking with us. Mr. Mahawar, we're trying to understand where does the buck stop in terms of taking the decision of leaving 700 people in cyclonic seas versus getting them back home. If you can help us understand, who would have been that person who would have taken this decision for each of these barges? Is it their individual leader? Is it, the master ship that takes the decision? Is it the company? Is it the company who put out this contract and got in these third-party consortium workers? Who's responsible?
See, responsibility, if you see in terms of responsibility, first I would like to tell you one thing, that the people who are working in offshore, they are being trained, well trained to be facing this kind of situations. If you remember in 2005 when the BHN accident took place, and there were about more than 350 people were on board, and we could rescue most of them. Only 11 were missing. So this is the risk which is there definitely. But these people who are working in the high seas, they are being well trained to face this kind of situation, and how to come out from this situation also they have been taught. And definitely the Navy and the Coast Guard, they are helping us definitely. And another thing which you are talking about, the responsibility, basically the team leader who is there, they sees how the cyclone is moving, and accordingly decisions are being taken, because the cyclones which are there in the seas, definitely they don't have one course of action. They normally change the course. So accordingly decisions are being taken and evacuation plans are being made. So each and every ship which is working in offshore, they have their SOPs, and as per their SOPs, they are working. So that kind of a system is already there. If you talk about ONGC, we have the SOPs, yes, in place. If these are the conditions, what is to be done, and how the people are to be evacuated, those all plans are in place when they are going to the seas. And another thing which is being done in these kind of platforms, that people are being trained and retained by conducting drills. We do the abandoned drills, we do the in the seas drills. People are being jumping into sea. Like if you take my case, I don't know swimming, but with the life jacket, I can jump into the sea because I know it's very safe. So this kind of training definitely helps them. And that is the reason, if you see, most of the people are being saved. So that is there definitely. But the situation is not under your control, but we can save the people. That much I can definitely say with the kind of training which has been given to the people working in the field.
No, Mr. Mawar, I know what you're saying in terms of training, but this is the kind of cyclone where a ship has sunk, where one of the barge vessels has sunk, because that's how bad and intense it was. And you know, the rescue ships and the choppers are trying to get to the other ones, and it's for two of them the rescue work hasn't even begun. So we have to at some point admit and acknowledge that this was an extremely severe cyclonic storm. And if it is an extremely severe cyclonic storm, there was no reason why these people should have been there. Now, like you said, that situation is constantly tracked. The intensity of the cyclone is tracked and decisions are taken. Could there be a possibility that it didn't look so serious up until May 15th, and you thought you had time till May 18th night, as was the earlier landfall prediction? But suddenly it became extremely intense, it changed directions, and by then it was too late to call for help or to move these barges. I mean, even if you don't move the barge, you could have called for choppers to fly in and get these people out. Wouldn't that have been a possibility before the cyclone hit?
Normally, the choppers are not flying in these kind of situations, only the supply boats which we are there, because in offshore, if you see, a lot of supply boats are working, and we normally offload people on the supply boat, and they are being taken to the shore. And only the very few people are being left. Those in case of emergency can be brought by chopper. Normally, when this kind of situation is happening, the chopper operations is very, very risky, because the winds are so strong. It will be difficult for a chopper to land on a smaller area where the crew change takes place, basically. So the best way is, normally people are being transferred to the OSVs, offshore supply vessels, and from there they are being transported to shore. In this case, I think the way they might have prediction that we will not get hit by such a strong wind, and why the ship had sunk, because it has collided. Basically, if it not have collided, it would have been floating. Like if you see on ONGC, one of the rig, all the anchors were slipped, but the rig was moving and drifting. It was not sinking, because it was totally intact. But in this case, it has collided with one of the platform, and one of the engine room got flooded. because once the flooding takes place, definitely the buoyancy factor goes down and the ship starts sinking. So that is a process which has happened there. Nobody thought that it will go and collide and this thing will happen.
Let's talk about this. That if the warnings were issued and as clear, the warnings got as clear as this, that all ships should get out of the harm's way, not venture out into the seas as of May 14th. Then, Commodore Vasan, is there also a second authority that ensures that these advisories are followed? I mean, if there are larger vessels, barges and ships out there who don't seem to be responding to it advisory, is there an entity within the Navy or the Coast Guard or anybody else who asks them and questions them as to why they have chosen not to respond?
Yeah, no, first of all, I would like to respond to some of the assumptions which have been made. This was related to the fact that, if it had not collided, we would not have had this kind of a scenario. It's something that I cannot accept, because with a storm like this, collisions are part of the deal. Ship sinking is part of the thing which will happen. So I think I go along with Mr. Rajesh, who clearly said, sorry, Mr. Ramesh, Dr. Ramesh, who said that, these people should have been brought back. In the case of the fishermen and those who are in the low-lying areas, the state government has a responsibility, and all of them immediately rush into the action, evacuate them, have the national disaster response agencies move them into action, etc. Over here, obviously the ONGC, which is overseeing, though it's been subcontracted and they have different vessels which are floating, I think there is also a mention which was made about the standard operating procedure. It's very clear that the standard operating procedure has not worked. So obviously we have to go back and say whether the standard operating procedures are valid for situations such as this, which has been predicted. Not that we did not have time to evacuate these people. I don't buy that argument that we did not have time, because with modern prediction systems, we were able to predict that this is forming, and this is the kind of wind speeds that are expected along the Maharashtra and Gujarat coast. And so obviously, these small vessels are not built to take this kind of battering that comes in a storm which is raging at 300 kilometers. So I think we have erred in our judgment of leaving these small ships alone with hundreds of people who are stranded there. There was no guarantee that they will not collide. When the anchors break loose, 8 of them which are broken loose, and it moves anywhere under the guidance of wind and the tide, it can hit anything. So and they are not self-propelled; they are towed. So I think there has been serious error of judgment in allowing these barges to be there where they were, and risking the lives of people who are sustaining our economy drive through the Bombay High projects. So I don't think I'm happy about what has happened.
Okay, Mr. Datta, you wanted to come in? Go ahead, please.
Two things, Tanvi. One is Mr. Ramesh and another panelist. We tend to be comparing everything with some fishing village and some low-lying area. That's like oversimplifying the thing. And the second is that, we are apparently moving towards, it's like after a plane crash. A plane has crashed and we immediately say, oh, okay, it's pilot error. So I think we should not immediately jump to conclusions. Yes, questions are being asked and should be asked. After every incident, as I said, not just with ONGC, in any major company globally, people go back to the standard operating procedure. And mind you, these standard operating procedures are not like one incident or one company. There is a general global, parameters which are practiced generally globally. But every region has different, like for example, Gulf of Mexico is a very unstable sea. And it's very violent sea, and they see a lot of these cyclones. So they have an empirical formula sort of a thing, a procedure sort of a thing, dating back from 1950 to 2003, tracking all that. So after every major storm, every major event, natural event, people do go back to the drawing board and they'll see whether the standard operating procedures were followed, and if they were followed, were they enough, or do we need to do that? I know for a fact, and Mr. Mahawar can bear me out, that after the disastrous 2005 MHL platform accident, ONGC for several years worked on their safety aspect and how to ensure, and they now have a very robust safety mechanism inbuilt. For example, they have a 24/7 manned strategic unit which is always in touch with these offshore installations. So yes, whether they should have been evacuated, whether the barges should have moved, whether there was time enough to do that, all that will come to light. I'm sure ONGC and of course, and also.
No, but why do you say that? I can see that you're giving a benefit of doubt, Mr. Datta, and I'm trying to
I am not
understand
giving
why.
benefit
Why
of-
do you say whether there was enough time when the first warning to
No, I
move
am not
everybody
giving-
out was issued as early as May 13th and 14th?
No, as I said, why I'm talking about time is right at the outset. I had explained that these are not, something like you put people on a truck and you move them away. I mean, there are operations, there are ongoing things going on. I mean, or some operations are going on. Suppose you are drilling and you have some gases coming out. You can't just abandon and stop the drilling, and because then there will be a bigger disaster.
I would say, and because you gave this example, that if rough weather conditions and cyclonic conditions exist, and the pilot of the plane believes that he can handle it, and he goes into it and the plane crashes, then he is held responsible for it. Now, ONGC in this case has washed its hands off it, saying, well, it was a third-party consortium, an external company, like you pointed out, not ONGC directly, but another company that was handling a couple of these vessels at least, and it's up to them. And that company is currently extremely tight-lipped about what went on. I'm only raising these questions because I do hope, and I do intend to keep pushing it until there is a timely investigation to tell us what happened. Mr. Mawar, you wanted to come in?
Yeah. Actually, I just wanted to tell that the ONGC, when have a contract with somebody, we have a bridging documents. We have some policies with us. ONGC has a policy and the company has a policy. So we come to an agreement that these are the things which we have to do in case of emergencies. So the bridging documents is being prepared, whether it's operating rig or you're working on a barge. And one thing where Mr. Datta has said that the operations are such that you can't immediately suspend those operations. Suppose we are drilling at a depth of 4,000 meters. So we have to secure the well. Otherwise, it will be a different catastrophe. So these are things like the barges. We are laying the pipelines, and the kind of pipelines, the pipelines are laid on the ocean floor. So what kind of work they were doing, whether they were prepared to leave their job as it is, or they have to secure. So these kind of things are to be taken into consideration. Like in case of Sagar Bhushan, if you say all the 8 anchors drifted, it was in the drilling mode. Immediately they pulled out, and by the time they pulled out the string, the anchor started slipping. 3 anchor broke, and rest of the anchor slipped. So this is the things which you can't predict. But foremost thing is that we have to see that whatever operations we are doing, we are leaving it in a safe mode, so it will not further aggravate or create any catastrophe. So that is the thing which is to be, I think, understood by everyone. It's not like the warning has come and immediately we.
Let me ask you a follow-up question to that, Mr. Mawar. Correct. Okay. Out of the 4 vessels that sent this SOS, 3 were barges which were working on an ONGC project. The contract of the project was given to a consortium of companies led by Afcon Infrastructure, and the stranded people were part of this consortium. Now, they were essentially working on revamping the top side of 20 aging well platforms. That was the work that they were doing, the offshore work that they were doing. The 4th one, which was the ONGC drill ship, was drilling rig for ONGC, deployed for obviously the exploration purposes, which had 37 of the company employees on board, and the rest were contractual employees. Now you say, Mr. Mawar, that obviously situation is tracked and then decisions are taken. Now, if it is going to take time for any barge or ship of this kind to react to a stormy situation which will need evacuation of people on ground. And I'm sorry, I don't really care about the barge vessel and the infrastructure itself. I am specifically going to talk about lives which are involved. And if how long will it take for them to then get the people out? Because obviously then they have to keep that in mind. It is going to take me 4 days to shut down operations, to put it in a safer zone, whatever work is going on, and get these people out. So 4 days before this cyclone gets to us, I have to take this decision. Isn't that how it should work?
Yeah, definitely, you're right. Actually, the decisions are being taken that way only. The base, there's a team, a control room is set up already. They have normally a control room is set up at the base, and they constantly interact with them, and they tell the situation also, and accordingly decisions are taken. Maybe in this case, I don't know how this cyclone has moved. Normally, if you see that cyclone is moving towards the direction of the workplace where the barges or the rigs are there, these are being evacuated in advance, because I myself I got evacuations maybe about 6 or 7 times. So that has happening and is happening in this kind of environment. So in this case, unless until we find out what went wrong where, so that I think we should find out as soon as possible. And as Mr. Datta said, I think some of the SOPs, if need to be corrected, they are to be corrected, definitely.
Correct. Okay, fair enough. And of course, we want to know that as well. Now, before I wrap this up, I have last question for Mr. Palawat and Mahesh. We spoke about this briefly yesterday itself. But in the light of all of what has happened now, especially with these 4 vessels, the fact that we are now seeing more and more cyclones and stronger intensity cyclones even on this west coast and not just in the Bay of Bengal area, is there a larger systemic relook that we have to do, right from upgrading our weather tracking systems to the alerts and the communication systems to even, faster response time for rescue?
See, this time also we were right on time, and I bet it's time at all issued warning right on time. But yes, you are right that the Bay of Bengal, in place of Bay of Bengal, now Arabian Sea is also warming up, and more and more storms are forming in Arabian Sea, and intensity and frequency is also increasing year by year. This last 3 years, we have seen number of cyclones forming in Arabian Sea as well. And some of them traveled along the coast towards the Gujarat coast, or you can say Maharashtra coast. Last year, we have seen Nisarga making landfall over south of Mumbai, over Alibag. So the surveillance system is very limited on west coast. And I've already told you that one Doppler radar is over Trivandrum, second one is over Kochi, and recently installed a radar over Goa, and one is over Mumbai, which was not functional, unfortunately, during that time. And one is over Bhuj. So we need 4 to 5 more radars, Doppler radars, to make accurate surveillance and pinpoint the location of system. So now-cast warning or the warning should be in place well before time. But this type of eventuality will happen if the concerned agency ignore the warning, because as Mr. K.C. Ramesh has rightly said, that in eye of cyclone, where eye of cyclone is there, there can be error margin of 50 to 100 kilometer in that forecasting track, and either side of that eye of cyclone, 150 this side and 150 that side, that 300 kilometer, and error margin is 100. If it is 100 kilometer, then there is a 400 kilometer margin. So the agency should rewrite their SOPs to take into account the error margin also, and the radius for the destruction, the potential destruction which can take place in the either side of eye of the cyclone.
Yes, I mean, let's just, I think all of us will agree that this work that goes on in offshore rigs for exploration, drilling, and then the maintenance, all of it requires special skills, special trainings. And like Mr. Mawar was also pointing out, everybody who's at these locations, series of safety precautions are taken, not just for the weather conditions, but also for fire safety and so much more, because it's a challenge and it's a tricky place to be. But when there is such a cyclone around the corner, we need to ensure there are multiple checks and balances in place. And the final decision isn't just in the hands of one single person, perhaps, on that location, deciding the fate of 300, 400 lives. Across these 4 barges, there were over 700 people stuck in the cyclone, sending SOS as late as yesterday afternoon. By then, the cyclone was wreaking havoc in this entire area. It took the ships, rescue ships also, over 18 hours to reach this place because one of the ships had drifted and was further going away and away. The rescue ops on the other 2 are yet to begin. Is it really worth taking this risk? And if there is a human error or a wrong judgment call and not just a delayed warnings or an ignored warning situation, then we need to put in more checks and balances. More authorities and voices who look into it and take a call, and not just that one person. We cannot be taking lives so casually. Thank you so much to all of our panelists and to our viewers for joining us on this conversation.